Hey, George, I saw you wave. How you doing?
I am well. I have to run outside for a second. I'll be right back.
That's okay. Clarissa, how is your audio?
It's good. Can you hear me?
I can, loud and clear. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that you are a presenter, okay? And I'll give about 2-3 more minutes for people to join before we start the meeting. So I believe, oh, sorry, go ahead, Charles.
I was just gonna say, you saw why I was confused, right? Because it said 1022 on there. I was like, wait a minute, did I miss something? You know, I had a birthday earlier this month, so my brain's kind of like, woo.
What was 1022? Was that on the agenda, the minutes?
Yeah, when you sent it out, it says your October meeting is next Wednesday. This was sent out on the 19th. And then it said, here's the link to join our meeting at 4 p.m. on 1022. So I read that and I was like, wait a minute. I thought I just completely spaced some discussion we had or something.
No, I spaced that 2 is different than the number 7.
That's all right. I'm glad it all works out.
I make mistakes also. Clarissa, so I can make you the host, but I don't want to do that. Would you try to share your screen and see if it'll allow you to just do that? Because I don't even think I need to do anything.
Okay.
So down at the bottom, there should be a little share screen icon.
Yes.
Okay. Yep. It'll let you just go ahead and do it without being the host. So you can stop screen sharing and we will do that once it's your turn, but we have a couple of housekeeping things for the first 10 minutes.
So you are seeing the PowerPoint, is that correct?
Yeah, it just says ACES Study and Discussion with your name and the logo.
Got it. Okay.
Great. Perfect. I'm glad we tested that out. I'll give 1 more minute for folks to join. And then Clarissa, I'll probably introduce you right up front and then have you introduce yourself again right before your presentation.
Sure.
Okay, well, it is 4:01. So hi, folks. I'm Julie Arena, and I am the coordinator for your HOPE Advisory Board. For those who don't know me, I want to make sure to introduce our guest for today's meeting. Clarissa, go ahead and introduce yourself to the board.
Hello, everyone. My name is Clarissa McGee, and I am a regional manager for Oregon and Family Support Network, and I work out of the Salem office. My area of management is from Lincoln County all the way over to, I believe it's Baker, and everything in between.
Wow. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Clarissa is going to do her portion on adverse childhood experiences after we do a couple of housekeeping things in the beginning. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Give me just a sec, everybody. Let's put it in slideshow mode. Okay. Give me just a sec. Okay, making sure everybody gets admitted from the waiting room. So welcome to your October meeting. You should be on mute when you join, but you can unmute, and I ask that only the board members unmute themselves outside of the public comment period. There will be a public comment period for anybody who joined from the general public. I ask that you please type into the chat. So you click on the little icon that has a bubble and says chat, put your name and the general topic of what you'd like to make a public comment on. And then I'll also give an opportunity for anybody who's called in on the phone, although I don't see anybody on the phone yet at the meeting. So here's your overview of your meeting. We'll do a little housekeeping in the beginning and an update on scheduling. And then Clarissa will do her educational component. And then I've got a brief update with some progress that's been made on the HOPE recommendations implementation. And also a brief check-in about some recruitment priorities for the board vacancies. And then the meat of your meeting, about a whole hour for discussion, will be about the next steps for you as a board and what role the board can play going forward. Just a reminder about all of your agreements for your culture and conduct for this board. And the check marks are the ones that multiple people rose their hand to or voiced as far as inclusivity and curiosity and kindness and respect and being open-minded. You guys have done you all have done a fantastic job of sticking to this culture. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing and see if we have any public comment. I don't see anything in the chat. I also do not see anyone calling in on the phone. Are there any folks who could not figure out the chat function or didn't have time to type into it and who would like to make a public comment today? You can go ahead and unmute yourself now. Okay, I am not seeing anybody wanting to make a public comment today. If you can note that, Paula. And you know what, Paula, I haven't checked in with you. How's your audio today?
It's good. I can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, well then I'll go ahead and screen share again. I sent out the meeting minutes from September and Jen Napak had a couple of edits. Thank you, Jen, so much for your wonderful eye for edits to make sure that things were spelled out accurately and accurately characterized, things like House Bill and other things like that, but there were no substantive changes to your minutes. So are there any other changes that any board members would like to make to the September minutes? I am hearing none, but I am hearing typing. Is that you, Paula? If you want to go ahead and mute yourself.
Julie, this is Peggy McGuire, and if there are no other changes, I would move to accept the minutes as amended.
Thank you, Peggy. Is there a second?
I second that.
Was that Brian Cotter?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Brian. I'm going to go ahead and call roll. Just say here and either yes or no or abstain for your vote on the minutes. Flip Anderson.
Here and I vote yes.
San Ojero.
I'm here and I abstain.
Catherine Bisco. Are you not with us today, Catherine? It doesn't look like you are here yet. Okay, Carol Butcher.
I'm here and yes.
Thank you. And Bruce, I'm sorry, it says excused from last month when I knew you weren't going to be there. Bruce, I do see that you're here, so go ahead and vote.
Okay, present and approved. Thank you.
Yes. Brian Cotter.
Here and approved.
Thank you. Anita Earl.
Here and approved.
Joel Goodwin.
Here and approved.
George Grosh.
Here and approved.
Barbara Hanley.
Here and approved.
Alita Hess-Holcomb.
Here and approved.
Alita, I think you were not able to join last month because of the Corvallis Sustainability Coalition.
I was going to say the minutes look a little bit unfamiliar, so forget that. Abstain.
Thank you. Christina Jansilla. You know, I did not see Christina calling in on the phone. So let's go to the next. Charles Mon.
Here and approve.
Peggy McGuire.
Present and approved.
Dharma Mirza.
Here and approved.
And Jim Moorfield is absent. He has an excused absence. He is gone this month, Paula, if you can note that. Andrea Myrie. Okay, I don't see Andrea here. Jan Napak.
Present, yay.
Reese Stotzenberg.
I am here and approve.
Janie Tebow.
Unmute. Here and abstain.
Thank you. And yes, Dharma Krishna, thank you. I don't know why this says August. You can tell I've had a couple of typos for this slideshow. This is supposed to say September 2021 minutes and roll call. I apologize and I will update that. Dharma Krishna, thank you for the catch. Okay, your minutes pass. Thank you for that. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Clarissa from Oregon Family Support Network, and I will stop sharing and hand it over to her. And thank you so much for being here today.
All right. Let me make sure that I can do this again. So I'm hoping that you're seeing just the presentation. Is that correct?
Well, now I'm seeing something different than before, and I can see the taskbar and display settings and end slideshow. So I think you might have to enter the slideshow.
Okay.
So what you did the first time worked perfectly.
It's the same thing again, isn't it?
Here you go. No, this is good. This is perfect. We're getting
That's
the
perfect.
Thank you. I really enjoyed looking at your, I'm not sure, I can't remember if you listed them as kind of like ground rules or agreements, but I absolutely love those. My favorite one is to assume positive intent. As I said, my name is Clarissa McGee, and I work for Oregon Family Support Network. We are a group of peers, meaning that we have shared lived experience. So everyone here has either raised a child or a family member that has a mental health diagnosis, and has that experience of navigating systems. So I also have the title of peer as an adult because I have my own mental health diagnoses. And so that is what I wanted to talk with you about. And I just wanted to let everyone know that the things that I have to say might be a little bit triggering, maybe a little bit activating. I'm going to try to be as general as possible, but I also want to be somewhat specific because I want you to understand. So I just want to put that out there. And also I want to let you know that you are free to ask me any questions, and I will answer you as best I can. So we're here to talk about the ACES study. Just 1 second here. Okay. So what is the ACES study? The ACES study looked at 3 categories of adverse experience: childhood abuse and neglect and household challenges. People that took the study, it was done by KAISER Permanente, and it followed, I can't even remember the number of people, but a lot of people, really a lot, for over 40 years, I believe. And so they really got a full picture of what kind of experiences these folks had, but also how that impacted their lives and how that impacted costs for the insurance company themselves and the folks that were getting the services. I experienced child abuse from inside the uterus. My mother was a drug user and used LSD and acid and marijuana and cocaine, all while she was pregnant with me. Also, I experienced rejection and neglect because my mother did not want to be a mother, and she had to. So from the age of 3, I experienced child abuse and sexual abuse as well. My mother dropped me off and left me with other family members, and those things started happening to me. There were times when I was left alone for hours and hours, and I didn't know where any adult was. There were times when I was found with cocaine covering my entire face and body because it had been left out and people were passed out. So as I got older, I basically became a foster kid, but I was a foster kid in my own family. So I got sent from my mother to my grandmother to my aunt, and I had 3 aunts. So I got sent back and forth between all of those households, and sometimes back with my mother again. And so we moved a lot. And like I said, I was going back and forth. So I moved schools a lot. It was hard for me to make friends. It was hard for me to learn in school. I did not learn how to read until I was in the 4th grade. And I think everyone thought that I had a learning disability or that something was really not right cognitively until they finally decided to put me aside in a different room and kind of like separate me from all the attention, from all the things that I could pay attention to. And they gave me a little window, piece of paper. And that way I was able to see just one sentence at a time. And so I was able to read through and I was able to learn how to read. And so everyone was shocked. Oh my gosh, she can read. So then all of a sudden they were asking me to be in the talented and gifted program. So it was just kind of interesting that I suppose it's partly because I moved from place to place, that no one really recognized what was going on with me or why I was having the behaviors that I was having. My mother moved to Oregon and I changed schools again. And then it was time to graduate. And I learned that my father had passed away. So I never knew my father. I never knew my grandfather. He passed away before I was even born. And when we moved to Oregon, I had to start all over again, learn new teachers, learn new friends. And then I think I probably went back and forth to New Mexico about 4 more times throughout my high school years. I experienced bullying. I had difficulty passing my classes. However, I will say I graduated with a 3.85 from high school. And I got married when I was 18, and I got pregnant when I was 20. And that relationship was abusive. And then my daughter and I fled. And then a few years later, I got remarried, and that relationship was abusive as well. And we stayed there for 12 years, and I had 4 more children. After that, we fled, and then I was raising my children. And that is where the family lived experience that I have comes from, because what you might hear coming up about the ACES study is that folks like me meet other folks like me and get married and have children. And some of the issues that we experience are genetic. There's a genetic component. So therefore, my children got it from both sides. And 3 of my children developed schizoaffective disorder, which is a combination of bipolar and schizophrenia. One of my children just recently passed away due to drug use in June. that was very difficult. The children that I was raising were amazing and lovely, and now they're lovely adults. However, their childhood was extremely difficult. First of all, there was domestic violence that was happening, and then we were by ourselves, so single mother, low income, and every single one of my children had a mental health diagnosis. And so my own personal issues were put aside so that I could help my children with their issues. And what I didn't realize is that we all have issues and we were not helping each other either. So I dove into mental health treatment, and I learned by doing. And so I decided that I would take a job in a school district, and I would work as a special ed assistant so that I could learn exactly the things that my kids were learning. I could speak with them the same way. And as I did that, I learned things about myself, and I learned about the ACES study. And at first, I was really depressed by the information that I was reading. My score was 10 out of 10. Or actually it was 9 out of 10. And I got really depressed. I was like, okay, I guess that means, you know, statistically speaking, I'm gonna have a lot of things happen to me. I could get sick, I could have a heart attack, I could have a stroke. I mean, we all can, right? However, a person that has experienced things similar to myself can develop all kinds of different physical health issues as well. And I definitely have. So I have also developed fibromyalgia myself. So I want to go on to
Clarissa, can I just interject just to say thank you very much for sharing such a personal journey. And I want to make sure you see some of the chats from our board members expressing gratitude and condolences. And thank you for your honesty before you move on. Okay,
thank you. I thought you were going to say, stop, you're being too honest. I can't see the chat, so I'm sorry. So I said all of that to emphasize the information that we're going to go over right now. And so people that have taken these tests during the KAISER study, 13% of them had a score equal to or higher than yours. And definitely a lot or actually higher than the scores that I received from you folks.
Clarissa, can you back up just a second? And when you say yours, there's a lot of folks who are tuning in who are not on the board. So can you describe a bit of what we're looking at here?
Yes, I apologize. So the board members agreed to take the ACES evaluation and the resilience evaluation as well. And so when I say yours, that's what we're referring to. I can definitely, maybe Julie, if you could put a link to like the ACES, I don't know if you have it, that folks could take a look at that. So folks that came and reported what their experiences were, there were a lot of similarities: abuse and neglect and household challenges. And I want to say, I feel like that is kind of a ironic statement, household challenges, because we're talking about a family member being in jail. We're talking about divorce. We're talking about mental illness, which sometimes can be schizophrenia or bipolar, which are very, very difficult. Substance use, again, extremely difficult. And then domestic violence, that impacts everyone. So I wouldn't That's a really minimizing way to put that. Let's just put that way. So with an ACE score of 0, the likelihood of becoming an alcoholic or any of the things listed here is extremely low. You can see those scores. With an ACE score of 4, the percentages go up. And then 4 and above, everything goes up. Some of the risks are tripled and doubled. And so how many of us have ACEs? How many of us have experienced things like this? Almost 2/3 of adults surveyed have reported one adverse childhood experience. So here are some diagrams that I wanted to show some statistics. 36% of people in the study experienced 0. 12.5% of people experienced 4 or more. So here are the scores that came in from the board. We had 2 zeros and we had 3 2s, 1 3, 1 4, 1 6, and 2 10s. And then there's also another part of the ACES study that came after, and that was called the Resiliency Questionnaire. And our scores were anywhere from 25 to 93. And the higher the score there means the more resilient you are. And so evaluating the answers, all of the self-assessment statements were phrased positively for the resiliency side of the questionnaire. And we can see that there's like a reduction across the board in everything. Lower scores signify that attention and skill building are required. So, you know, if there's a lower score with resiliency, there's classes, there's support groups, there's books, there's movies, things that you can study, all kinds of self-help things. So there are wide-ranging health and social consequences that come from the adverse childhood experiences. But there are things that we can do to help prevent that. And that is what resiliency is all about. So we have parent support groups for teens and teen pregnancy prevention, mental illness and substance use treatment, all of the things listed there. And I will tell you that I participated in just about every single one of the things listed there. And by going to school and working with kids that were just like mine and learning exactly what was going on and learning about the mind and how that works as well. I would stay up nights reading and researching and reading about how can I help my kids? And so after I was finished working at the school district, I then took a job with NAMI of Washington County, and that changed my life, really.
Larissa, can I interject just so we be sure to say out the acronyms like National Alliance for Mental Illness
Yes,
for folks who don't know what NAMI is? Okay, good.
Thank you. That's also part of my job as a peer, is to point out acronyms. NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and they are a national nonprofit agency that supports both families and adults that have mental health issues themselves. And I worked there for 4 years, and I learned a lot, and I worked with families. And as I grew, they grew, you know, we grew together, and it was, it was a beautiful experience. Then I came to OFSN and I learned even more. And here I am. I feel that without learning mental health exercises and tools that I could use without getting therapy, without taking classes or books, I would not be where I am today. So I say that a lot of my resiliency came from diving into all of these programs that are listed here.
Clarissa, would it be okay to interject for a minute? Because I don't think you can see the chat, and one of our board members wasn't able to take the test that the group did because she's down visiting family out of state. And she shared that her ACES score is 8. And Peggy, do you want to chime in and verbally share the rest of what you'd like to share?
Sure. Thanks, Julie. I have been so fortunate in my life. I have had amazing, supportive folks that believed in me and that reached out to me and were role models and mentors. My resilience score is 12, and I had one sibling. His ACES score was also 8. His resilience score was 2, and 3 years ago he killed himself after a lifelong battle with drug abuse and mental illness. And so that resilience piece, I just cannot stress to you how much that resilience piece is so important in our community to build healthy people.
I 100% agree with that. Thank you, Peggy. And thank you for stopping me, Julie. Feel free anytime to step in. I myself cannot stress that enough either. I work with families within the wraparound program, and some of you might be familiar with wraparound, but the state of Oregon has an amazing program where we try to get everyone that can help the child and the family at the same table and help them to learn a process that can also better support them as they navigate systems. Through helping families do that and navigate that system, I also have gotten resiliency from that. I just can't stress enough that agencies like NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and OFSN, which is the Oregon Family Support Network, and so many more are extremely helpful. And I would not be here had I not received that help. Support groups are amazing, and that is how I met lifelong friends who have supported me. So here's the sorry, the last one is what we were just talking about, is what can we do about ACEs, and how can we make sure that things get improved over the years instead of, you know, folks passing away earlier or not getting the help they need, and then the cycle perpetuating. So the last thing I will say about the cycle perpetuating and about stopping that, I took every one of my children to therapy. I took them to psychologists for evaluations, and we went to family therapy together. And I will say that 3 of my kids graduated high school, 3 out of 5. And 3 out of 5 are doing really well right now. And we have a really great relationship, and we've come really far. So thank you for letting me share my story with you. And I'm completely open to questions.
Thank you, Clarissa, for all of your honesty and vulnerability here. And I just want to highlight what some of our board members chimed in to express condolences for the loss of your kiddo, and also for your vulnerability in the emotional labor of this presentation. Dharma Krishna said it the best. So thank you for that.
Sure, absolutely.
And I just want to high level underscore the importance of why you're here today for a board that's looking at policy recommendations on homelessness and housing instability and access to resources, because homelessness and the causes of it are extremely complex, and they're tied to adverse childhood experiences and mental illness and substance use. And it's not a simple fix with simple solutions, because you're talking about a whole person with experiences that go back to childhood and determine their ability to be resilient as an adult. And so that's really the purpose of you being here today. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad that you said something about because I didn't share everything in my story.
You don't have to. You share what you're comfortable with.
No, I'm not going to do that. But I'm not going to go on and on. But what I did want to say is that we also did experience homelessness. When we fled the domestic violence situation, we had to move in with my mother. And you might remember what I was saying about my mother, very toxic, not okay. So we kind of lived in the car, but we had one bedroom with 6 people and 2 dogs. And then we had a minivan with 6 people and 2 dogs. So I'm laughing now because I get my laughs where I can. But the point is that it was not easy to be without a home with 5 children and 2 dogs. It's not easy for one person. And that's a whole other presentation.
Well, thank you
I'll
for
leave it
being
at that.
here and really giving a human face and voice and heart to a topic that's, a complex one. I want to make sure we have some time for questions from our board members. I see Jan's hand up. Are there other board members? If you'd like to ask questions after Jan, please go ahead and give me some kind of cue or put something in the chat. So go ahead, Jan.
Thank you, Clarissa. Very insightful. I appreciate your honesty and bearing your emotions. I was wondering if you happen to know if there are some demographic blanket attributes, especially for like, say, children in foster care that have a heightened score, if you will, just based on that quality alone, or that quality alone being in foster care. Is that something that you know about?
I'll say that it's something that I have a little bit of knowledge about. And you say demographic, I'm wondering, can you tell me more about that?
I think I would just use that word because I didn't have another word for looking at the category or the class or whatever you want to call it for the children in foster care.
Oh, okay. Well, I can tell you that as far as racially speaking, mental illness does not discriminate. And so it is across the board, for everyone. And any one of us can experience adverse childhood experiences and have it cause something further, like a mental health diagnosis. So it really kind of depends on a lot of factors, and it's highly individual. But I will say that the majority of foster children that I know of are not always there because of abuse. Sometimes they're there because parents, like myself, are asking for help with their kids because their mental illness is so severe that that they can't keep them at home, which is how it was for us. I don't know if I really answered your question, Jan.
Well, no, it's a very broad question. I was just wondering if there were some gross similarities or gross attributes that foster children would be.
I would
exposed
say
to.
that it's got to be mental health issues. It's got to be abuse and neglect issues. Yeah, I would say that right there.
Thank you, Clarissa. Do we have other questions from other board members?
I would follow up, and I'm sorry I missed part of your presentation, Clarissa. I appreciate you sharing your personal story. But as a group that is trying to do some problem solving around homelessness, what is it that that we can best do to make a difference? And what? So that, I guess that's my biggest question.
Sure. That is such a hard question. And I wish, I imagine all of us would struggle to answer it. So what I absolutely love is that all of you folks are here to problem solve about that issue. For families with children in tow, you generally won't see them out on the streets because they might be in a shelter that is for families, which there are not very many of. So we definitely need more shelters for families, or more opportunities for families to be able to stay together, because often they will double up with family members, and then maybe have a kid go to the aunt and another kid go to the uncle, and then families are being split up, and then it's very topsy-turvy, and they miss school and bad things happen. That is the family perspective. The other issue is drug use. I will say that my son that passed away in June was experiencing homelessness due to his drug use and his schizophrenia. And I will say that he and other youth that I experience are in need of a better treatment system, a better, oh boy, it's so complicated. It's the prison system and the punishments that people will get. So my son, being confused, would knock on people's doors and say that his friends were living there and that his things were inside, and could he please come inside? And I think he actually thought that his stuff was there, but then once he got inside, he would steal from people. And then, and then the police would get called, and then he would get arrested, and he would get in trouble because of drugs as well. So then he would get let out, maybe 30 days later, but now he's on probation. So every time, he's out there, they're going to, pick him up and test him again. And then clean and sober housing, unfortunately, if I could just share for 1 second, I testified before a Senate committee to get transitional housing for transitional age young adults, which I knew my kids were going to be at the time. The housing passed and has been built in Portland. And they, what they did was they gave incentive to folks, business folks, to build properties or buy properties and make them for transitional age youth. And there were treatment programs attached to it, and there were social workers and therapists and those type of things. The irony is that my son got out of the state hospital and got into that housing, and I was like, yay! And then the next day he called me and he was getting kicked out because he smoked pot in his room. So that is what the life of a parent with someone who has drug use is like, is that they go up and down and up and down and up and down and are very transient. So I listed mental health programs, drug and alcohol treatment, social workers, and a nice warm place to sleep.
Thank you for that, Clarissa. We have time for about one more question. Peggy, I saw you raise your hand. We'll see how long that goes, and then we might have time for one more.
Alrighty, I just wanted to again thank you, Clarissa, for your participation and your sharing, because it's not always easy to trot out all this personal stuff, and you have to be very vulnerable to do it. And so thank you so much. At CSC, we have some funding, or we've had some funding in the past for intergenerational programs. And that's where I really see where the rubber meets the road on a lot of this, because while we can work on building the resilience with the young people in the household, we can also work on addressing some of the trauma that the parents have had and helping the parents understand and be trained on how they can be the coaches and the advocates for their children going forward. It is a long trajectory, and it requires deep investment. And I think that is the struggle that we're all seeing, that there's just not that kind of money out there available for that long-term thing. The money that's out there is, we want to do a transaction. We want to hit the family, fix them up, and send them on their way. And it just, based on what Clarissa's talking about, it just doesn't work that way.
Unfortunately, it doesn't. And thank you for saying that, Peggy. So let's see. I said that my issue started when I was 3. That was 1971. I just told my age to everybody. And then when I was, going through domestic violence, that was 1989, and then also through 1994 all the way up to 2005. So there's a lot of awareness that has been raised over the years about domestic violence, about treatment, about therapy, about all of those things. But this was a lifetime of things that had to be dealt with. I am now 53 years old, and I'm okay. My kids are okay, but our journey started, really, the healing part of our journey started in 2005. It is now 2021. And unfortunately, the best help that we got, and I say this unfortunately, you'll understand why, is because the only way that we were able to get the help that we needed was either from the Oregon Health Plan or from nonprofits. There are not enough therapists, there are not enough psychiatrists or psychologists, especially for children. And unfortunately, COVID has made that worse. And I will say, last thing is that right now is also a very encouraging time because of COVID, because of how we're all seeing mental health issues coming out more and more, and in our kids for being isolated. More people like yourselves are willing to put more money towards mental health treatment. So now is the time to figure out what it is that you want to do and how you want to do it, and do it. And thank you for that.
Thank you, Clarissa. Are there any other questions or comments from anyone on our board? Janie, I see that you're here this month, and I know you missed last month, and I'm really glad to see your face here tonight. Thank you for making it. And Dharma Krishna, you raised your hand. Do you have a question?
I guess the question, or just kind of a thinking point for the other council members. I really appreciate the presentation. I think it's really important for folks to understand how ACEs are useful in describing population level change and not necessarily individual determinants. And the reason that I stress that is that I think this framework has been used or wielded against like communities of color, queer families, poor families, as if they're the cause of these adverse childhood experiences. There's some useful frameworks like pair of ACEs that have been used in Oregon that look at not only adverse childhood experiences, but adverse community environments as well. And I think it's really important to think about what are the structures that are causing or that are causing these adverse childhood experiences outside of the family unit. And I think for me, it's really helpful to think about it that way, because I think we can get in a really dangerous kind of mindset that like individual families are failing their children by causing these traumas or whatever, or not being able to support their children, when it's really adverse community environments. And the study again that I'm referring to, or the extension of ACEs, is called Pair of ACEs. And I encourage folks to look at that as well, because I think that it's really, really key for us to look at the ways that like things like community disruptions, discrimination, poor housing quality and affordability are really driving like physical and emotional neglect, or a lack of domestic violence housing or shelters or different things are driving domestic violence inside of the family unit. And so for me, I'm just thinking about that. I guess I'm wondering, Clarissa, how can we kind of find some parity between these individual measures and substantive policy interventions?
Wow. That's a great question, and great what you had to say. Like, keep coming, keep being here. Yeah. And of course, at least it happened now, Julie. I just lost my train of thought. Okay.
That's all right. Also, if you think of something afterward that might help round out the answer to Dharma Krishna's question, I can share it with the board too. But Dharma Krishna, thank you very much for that higher level perspective of looking at the systems that are contributing to these. And I hadn't heard of pair of ACEs. If you're able to put a link in the chat that would provide a resource to more information on that, I think that's really this board's role, is looking at more of the systemic changes that can help people on that individual level. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Julie, because now I remember. I would just say we have a system of care in every county. Some counties have joined together. We do have a system of care in your area. And what that is where we all come together from every discipline that interacts with kids from every child serving system. And we come together and talk about the issues that are going on specifically around mental health issues and children navigating systems with their families. So my point is that it would be amazing to have any one of you or every one of you on those committees, because it's a community effort. And amazing things happen when people get involved with those committees. I've seen it myself, and I believe it's part of my healing. So I would definitely encourage you to join any of those system of care committees, but also I would just highly, highly encourage you to make sure that you're getting, and I hate this word, but there's no better word, consumer feedback. Because get feedback from the people who are receiving the services or not receiving the services because they're not there. I'll get off my soapbox.
No, thank you. I really appreciate the information. I want to make sure that I get the right visual. So I'm going to make sure this is it. I think this is the pair of ACEs with the adverse childhood experiences on the top part of the tree, but really those foundational roots contributing to how that tree grows. Am I on the right one?
Yeah.
Okay. And the next slide on here is what I think you might be talking about in Oregon with Trillium and Concordia. Is that the group of folks you're talking about?
So Trillium and yes, and it's all over the state. So there's Trillium, there's any of the folks that do treatment. So like LifeWorks or Options, they would be there as well.
Okay.
And then all of the public agencies like ODHS and school districts and Juvenile Justice and Oregon Youth Authority.
Well, thank you so much for all this info. George, I see you've got a question. This will definitely be our last one for the board, and anything follow up we can do via email.
Yeah, not so much a question as just a follow-up. The Trillium piece that you saw in Oregon, what that is Trillium is participating in a collaboration with other groups in Oregon, large groups in Oregon, around mental health, raising mental health awareness. And so it's Mental Health Matters. You'll see them, they'll sponsor events, they'll run awareness raising campaigns, they give out awards to people that are working in the field. So really what they're doing is to talk about what Caressa has been talking about, is bringing it to the forefront of the community, saying that mental illness is a problem that runs across society and needs different ways to be addressed. So it's really more of an advocacy and awareness group, and along with the direct service they provide through their programs.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time here today, Clarissa. I know I didn't want to keep you past 5, and I really appreciate you being here. I know all the board members did with their comments in the chat. They have your email and can follow up directly with you if they have more questions. Thank you for being here.
That would be great. All right. Take care.
Yeah, you too. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next phase of your meeting. So give me just 1 second here. Let's make this bigger. So just wanting to do a check-in and a feedback loop for where the city and the county and providers are with implementing your HOPE recommendation number 6. And so I did an update about what's happening. And so for your first recommendation on data improvement, I made in italics some updates that have happened since last month. And a great one is that CSC has hired now their data support person. And Peggy, do you want to share anything more about that update? I know you filled the vacancy with someone internal, but any other update on that?
No, we did not fill it with somebody internal. We went out for an outward facing recruitment.
Apologies, I'm sorry.
And I am not positive if that person has shared anything. She starts November 1st. We are very excited. She's well connected in the community and understands all of these issues at a very, very deep level. I will share with you at our next meeting who that person is.
Fantastic. Well, I'm glad the recruitment went well. And another update on the topic of data improvement. Given the work that the city and county and providers have been doing to try to implement and find shelter locations immediately, it's very apparent why this HOPE recommendation is so important that you already recommended about the need to improve data. And so I have gotten the go-ahead to convene a work group on data improvement with local partners from IHN and Samaritan and Unity Shelter and Lynn Benton Housing Authority and CSC and our city and county internal staff to see what kind of data we can pull immediately to make some informed decisions and how we can make some improvements long-term with some recurring meetings of this work group. So those are some updates that have happened. The other update is under the priority recommendation number 6 about the sheltering system. And the city and the county team have really just been doing everything they can to look for specific sites. So Brigida Olson and Paul Bellata have been out gosh, every week, I think, looking at different sites for shelter options. And they are pursuing putting micro shelters, I think 4 micro shelters on City Hall property to really, really walk the walk. City Hall's moving forward. And I think Brigitte is still on the call. She might need to pop off, but is there anything else you wanted to add to that, Brigitte?
No, not at this time. Thanks.
Yeah, well, thank you for all the work you're doing on that. And on the county side of things, we are meeting weekly. The city and the county and provider leaders are meeting weekly and talking on more than a once weekly basis on all these different items. But the county is really looking at costing out and doing any kind of logistical planning for use of the fairgrounds. The real hurdles here are just capacity for staffing, because you can't stand up a location without the people to run it and support it and manage it and be there on site to help folks. And I think all of our providers would agree that trying to fill vacancies right now is really difficult and has been a challenge for all of our local providers. And so that's a hurdle that we're working on. The other update since last month is about communication. And I am working with our city and county team, folks like Paul Bellata and Brigitte Olson, Suzanne Hoffman and Sarah Hartstein, to try to roll out more communication on what's happening. The hard part is it moves real quickly and folks think we've found a site and then that site falls through. So it's hard to roll out information when it changes on a daily or weekly basis. But really wanting to be able to provide more consistent information about the progress on implementation and trying to brainstorm different strategies for how we publicize that information. So we're working on that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and see if there's any questions about implementation before you dive into your discussion of next steps.
Hey, Julie, could I just make a couple of comments about item number 6 or 7?
Sure, yeah. Let me share the screen again so people know what we're talking about.
Sure. So in the recent meeting that United Way, CSC, DHS, and County Health were involved, and Lynn Benton Food Share is a subset of CSC because they're one of our programs. So I'm going to include them in that we had a pretty good conversation that we feel like is moving things further along this trajectory. DHS has some space available in their Research Way building, and they're willing and interested in talking with a number of us to kind of create some anchor tenants that would start some sort of a one-stop session entity. And so what we began to look at was that navigation was the kind of first and foremost priority, so that people could come there, get their situation triaged, and somebody could help them navigate what comes next. And that housing was a fundamental piece of that, as well as access to other resources. And so I feel like there's a lot of movement in this direction that's happened just in the last week or so. And DHS has offered to share information about what kind of what amount of space they have available, what would be the cost of that space, what would be the parameters around that space, like could that be 24/7 access? Is it something that has to only be accessed within certain hours? And to really begin to understand, like, is that Research Way space the right space to start out? And then the partners that were on the call were discussing that some of us, for example, CSC, may be able to provide more money toward space rental, whereas an entity like Lynn Benton or Benton County Health might be able to provide staffing. So I feel like some great movement is moving forward in this group. More to come next month.
Thank you for that, Peggy. I'm sorry I missed the Monday meeting that Chris hosted. It was at the same time as our city county provider meeting on this topic. So I appreciate that update. Are there any other questions or comments to chime in on progress? Okay. Then I'll go ahead and screen share just to prompt your discussion with a couple of questions. But really this discussion for the next about 45 minutes you have is what role can you all as a HOPE advisory board play in supporting any part of implementing of your 12 recommendations? Because the city and the county and the providers, we're all grappling with the capacity to implement them and how do we do it and how do we collaborate? And when folks are really strapped with COVID outbreaks and all over our community and remote working and kids at home still. And so having the HOPE board move on to new items when implementing your previous 12 recommendations is still going to be a struggle. That's what this discussion is about. And so some of the thoughts that have been shared and with the executive committee and with other of your feedback on our one-on-ones where maybe the HOPE board could play some kind of a communication role to utilize your board to disseminate information. Perhaps your board could research what successful models of collaboration on homelessness look like. What's a realistic timeline to implement solutions on homelessness? What is a realistic capacity building for homelessness? And what does that model look like? So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and let you all talk as board members about your ideas for what role the HOPE board could play going forward. I promised myself I wouldn't pick on anyone, but I definitely will if none of you have ideas you're going to
So can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Carol. Go for it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not doing video because I've been out in the yard. I look a little funky. So this is to the HOPE group, and it's the housing committee, the League Housing Committee that I chair, has been getting feedback from some of the service providers that the communication with the city is difficult when it comes to homeless issues or construction or city processes. Particularly, it's come out of Unity Shelter and a little bit from Housing First. I don't know if the rest of you who work with the city have had any communicate. And this is not a criticism of the city. This is just life. So the question I have is twofold. One of them is, if you are a service provider and if you have felt that there has been, you're not getting timely information, it could be something from the fire department on codes or city standards or anything. I really would like to know, because if there's, what we're talking about is looking at our comparator cities in Oregon and saying, well, how are they set up to work with their city, and what's in place and what could we learn from them? If this is not an issue, if it's really just a couple of organizations that are complex and having, it's not working for them, then I'm not interested in our group, the housing committee, spending a lot of time trying to, come up with models if everybody says, well, what we have is pretty good. I'm not sure I'm being clear, but I would like to get some information either at this meeting or email me or tell Julie to tell me, or just so I know if we have I don't know if we have an issue here or not. That's the bottom line.
Carol, I think I understand you correctly. You'd like to hear from some service providers, perhaps if Andrea Myrie is on right now, or Alita or Anita. I'm trying to think of who our other service providers are.
Well, even, I don't know that, say CSC, they're trying to work through something and they have to go through the city, and the city is slower in response time. And, one of the things that came up with Unity Shelter was it was kind of at the last minute, everybody was trying to make something happen. Everybody's heart was good, but the timing was tough. And
yeah, Peggy, go for it.
Yeah, Carol, I just wanted to jump in here as far as with CSC. We are not feeling any barriers like the city or the county or whatever. It just feels like everything moves at the speed of molasses. And so, like, we need, things need to happen now because we're now in the sheltering season. But at the state level, at the city level, at the county level, anything that we have to do as far as processes, are just so slow, and that's a frustration. But I don't know anything immediately that would fix that. And I just want to say that that the city and the county have been really proactive in reaching out to those of us who are involved in this work, saying, how can we help? What can we do?
What I hear, because I'm also talking to developers about housing and getting more housing, and what I hear, and I think it's a cultural thing, is that the city isn't moving fast enough, that people have certain windows in which they have to get something done. And those windows aren't predictable. And so they need somebody who says, hey, this doesn't make any sense, but sure, we'll go with it. And that I think that's a cultural thing in Corvallis. We take a while to make decisions.
And I see that George wants to talk, but I just want to respond to what you just said, is that that's absolutely true. And I think it's true across many different jurisdictions. And part of the problem is that people who are trying to develop housing to respond to this need are using such a patchwork of funding resources, and that none of those have similar timelines. None of them fit well with one another, and there are so many requirements that you invest your own money to ensure that you have site control, that you've done all these certain things, and none of that is supported in any way, shape, or form by other funding sources.
Thanks.
I saw Jan's hand first and then George, and really wanting to make sure it's in line with your topic at hand here, which is what is the role of the Hope Board going forward, but also responding to Carol's more specific question about looking at successful models of collaboration.
Says this is something they want to have happen, but they don't have the bandwidth to do it, then we'll take it on.
Okay.
Vice versa. Sorry. Go ahead.
You know what? Actually, Jan and George, before I move on to you, we have one of our service provider executive directors on the call today. And so I just want to make sure you see his chat. And Ben, would you mind just going ahead and sharing that verbally for folks who can't see the chat?
Yeah, you bet. This is in response to Carol's comments about communications between the city and the county. And I agree that in the past it has been difficult. And I think part of it lies at, at least I'll take responsibility. I didn't exactly know who to go to when I had questions for the county or city, but I would say that the city and county have been amazing just over the last few months. It's been remarkably easy to get to the right place when you have a question for them. And they've been very proactive about reaching out to me and I think to other providers as well. So
great. Thank you.
I appreciate that comment, but I feel like it's a lot different now. Thank you.
We have a weekly meeting with Ben and Sean Collins and Allison Hobgood and Andrea Myrie when she can join, and Paul Bellata and Brigitte Olson from the city, and myself and Suzanne Hoffman, our county health department director, and Sarah Hartstein. And that's been happening for almost 2 months now, Ben, as often as we can meet to try to make some traction. But it's also just the time for our service providers who are executive directors in their own right and dealing with staffing shortages and timing and running their own organizations. So,
yeah, with all the meetings, it might be a thing of be careful what you wish for. We've got too much communication. I'm kidding. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, for chiming in. Jan, and then George.
As far as going, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
As far as going forward, I think that before we start going forward and launching initiatives and whatnot, we need to look at our structural organization. I think what we're not nimble, considering that we're looking at homeless issues from several different lenses. We've got children, youth, and families, we've got food, health and safety, chronic homeless, transitional homeless, so on and so forth. I was wondering if we could divvy this up into smaller bites, if we could somehow be more efficient or at least more effective if we were to make sure that we understand as we go forward that we can't do everything, that maybe we need to look at segmenting ourselves in some way. Anyway, that's just a suggestion, food for thought.
George, and then Barbara.
Thanks. You know, what Jan and Carol speak to are important. And with me, they bring up something that says, it's very difficult with what we're looking at here to disentangle so many issues because they're tied up in so many different ways and things are so closely interreacted. So I look at it a couple of ways. One of the things this group can do is help to define the goals. What is it that we're really trying to accomplish? Because the things that we've recommended to me are right now real heavy on building infrastructure that's necessary to begin to help to support people to move out of homelessness and address issues. And then there's a whole issue of housing. And while they're both intimately related, there's different paths of action that need to happen on each of those different things. And I think we can play a role in those things. And a couple of them are one, we should really educate ourselves around the idea about how you get affordable housing. Carol talked about a little bit about developers speaking certain ways, and you know, we talk about how difficult the city is to work for. That's a different piece, because if we're looking to private developers to solve an affordable housing problem, we're not going to get anything accomplished, because we've been doing that for the last 40 years and we know it doesn't work. So what we're looking to do is say, what can we do as a community to invest money time, and energy into supporting initiatives that put houses on the ground. And we've been successful working with private nonprofit developers to be able to do that. And that's a good place to continue to start. But we also need to look at what's the overall goal here? What are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to address a number of community-based problems that we're well aware of, and we're trying to put more housing on the ground. And so trying to keep those issues separate is part of what we can do. Defining the goals. What are we really trying to accomplish as a community? What's the end goal? You know, something along the lines of saying, for me, everybody knows where they're going to put their head when they go to bed tonight in Benton County. That would be a goal. And then how do we develop metrics to do that? And how do we develop plans that take us in that direction? But we just have to keep working to disentangle. This group can really serve as a place to say, where's the place the city and county can go to express ideas? We can pitch ideas, we can bring providers in, we can help to resolve problems if there are problems when they do come up. But the role is big, and it's just important to disentangle the piece between the systemic pieces of saying, how do we build more houses? And then how do we communicate about what it is we're trying to accomplish? Because they're kind of two different things. That was a lot, but they are connected and they are important.
Thank you, George. Barbara, and then Zan.
Yeah, and I'm just, George and I are thinking along the same lines. I wrote down a few of the things that you had listed in the slide, Julie. Communication, research, outreach. I think one of the things, and George touched on this, is that evaluation of the implementation that we're doing, and that evaluation process is very data driven. And then from that data that the board can help generate, disseminate. The other piece of that is, communicating what we find in terms of evaluating the process of the implementation process. And when Carol mentioned communication, from my perspective, it seemed that the focus was, communicating amongst the providers and the government. But I remember several conversations or several bits of information that we got from the public that they want more communication of what H.O.P.E is doing and what our progress is, and how we're measuring our progress and what our progress is. So I think that is a role that H.O.P.E board can have going forward, is the evaluation of our progress using, making it data driven, and then also communicating that better with the public.
Thank you for that, Barbara. Zan, if I can interject, just because it's exactly on what Barbara was talking about, some of the internal ideas that we generated that the H.O.P.E board might be able to come up with some feedback is what communication would be helpful for the general community on the progress of the recommendations being implemented. What kind of data would be helpful to share with our community? And what is even possible to share from the provider perspective, like from Peggy and Andrea? What is possible to share on like a monthly or quarterly basis? And how would that communication be helpful for our general community? That was an idea that we talked about internally that I wanted to respond to what Barbara just said before going to Zan.
Well, I don't think I'm going to say anything terribly different. Our bylaws speak to the fact that we have a role, an evaluation role. And I think that we need to think about that. I think we've got a great framework in terms of work to be done, and there's clearly a lot of it. I think we could take a look at each of our 12 areas and see whether or not we can delve a little bit deeper and maybe move the ball further, even in the absence of city and county work in those arenas, and really provide some of the legwork to flesh out some of those concepts that we described. But I agree with George and with Barbara that having a sense for what the measurement is, the metrics for success is important. And it would be wonderful to be able to put something together that describe those metrics for each of our 12 goals. And I know that it'd be an iterative process, because I suspect that we would do that and then suggest those metrics to the city and county. City and county would probably take a look at them and say, okay, and the community-based organizations, all three. All three of those entities, we need to bring them along. It wouldn't be our framework. It needs to be the community framework.
Thank you for that, Zan. I was just jotting down some notes because it's capturing what a bunch of you are saying, but it sounds like the H.O.P.E bylaws have this, meets once a month advisory board, a role, including some kind of evaluation and evaluating the progress of implementing your recommendations based on any data that's available, based on any data that the community would like to have communicated out, and based on metrics for success. And it sounds like that would require some research. And it sounds like it also would be in line with the work group that I'm facilitating on data improvements and what data is available right now. The metrics for success one, though, talk more about that as far as the role this board could play in recommending some metrics for success on your previous recommendations. Is that a work group type thing? Is that a research thing you'd like me to work on? And Peggy, I'd really love you to chime in on this one, because I know CSC already has some community action agency metrics for successful programs. So I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel here.
Okay, so I can jump in right now. We do have some metrics for success, but we're always looking for better metrics. And one of the things that we have is we are looking at, what's the return on investment? So the money that we invest in each household, like what is the outcome of a success? And we're trying to fine tune our measurements for what that looks like, what success looks like. And different programs, different grants that we have different measures of success. but we're looking longitudinally across our client population and trying to develop better ways to look at the data about this so that we can see long-term what is helping people. So looking at clients that we served 10 years ago, where are they today, and how did our programs help them get to where they are now? So it's a process that we're working on and continuing to try to fine tune. I can't say that we have perfected it in any way, shape, or form.
All right, I'm not seeing any other hands from board members. So the other idea I wanted to make sure to...
I have my hand up.
Oh, sorry, Alita, go for it.
I don't know, this is just because I'm tired, but my metrics are who slept in front of my door and didn't have a place to go, and where do people go November 15th, which was usually the date when sheltering started. We don't have that right now. We've got COVID and we can use that for excuses, but metrics, maybe just, I'd be glad to give you how many people I have not been able to find a place to sleep tonight. And that's what I'm seeing. And that's what I think we've got to figure out is where are they going to sleep? Who's going to pay for it? We're asking people to think in a really big picture on housing, but my lens is those folks that are in front of my doorway and there's no motel that we've rented out, but there's room for people in motels if they would rent one out. And I think it should be the city and the county that pay for that. I think there's money that could be allocated for doing that. And I'd like to see people get dry.
Yeah, Julie?
Yeah, Carol.
Well, I just want to follow up on that because I think the public, some of the people I talk with who are pretty darn smart, don't really understand what the role of HOPE is in driving decision making. They say, well, all HOPE does is and this sounds bad, but it's like, well, HOPE spends a whole bunch of time gathering metrics and doing this and doing that. But meanwhile, we've got the issues that Lita talks about, and HOPE isn't doing anything about those. And so and that's not the job of HOPE, but I think that the lack of clarity about, does HOPE have a leadership role in terms of pushing council, pushing county supervisors, and standing at that door and saying, look, these people are homeless and it's November 15th and let's move forward. That's our priority. Or what is the role of the executive council and nobody owns this issue, it seems like. It's just like, well, we got to do something, but it just rolls around. And
Zan,
yeah.
I think Zan wants to respond to you, Carol, and then
I bet
George.
she does.
Thanks, Carol and Alita. I hear the frustration, and I can assure you that all of the staff from city and county and the community-based organizations that are meeting weekly and trying to sort this out feel it. They feel it every day, and they're trying to wrestle with this issue. But what we decided and what we recommended and what City Council and the Board of Commissioners agreed to is that the approach we were going to take was using micro shelters. So we're looking for a place to place those micro shelters. It's difficult. As you all know, finding sites is really, really challenging, and it's slow. And even when we do find sites, we still need to have someone to provide the services to those people. And that's challenging, given the fact that we don't have enough staffing at any of our organizations right now, whether it's Corvallis Housing First or the county or the city or CSC, we're all looking for help. So it's not like we're not trying. And what I really want to ask all of you for is a little bit of grace, in the sense that when people complain really loudly or come to City Council and complain, it just hurts because everyone's trying, and that doesn't do anything for the person that's sleeping on your doorstep, Alita. It's just a really challenging situation.
When you say it doesn't help, I'm not sure what you mean. I think having people come and raise the issue in front of the electeds has to keep that in front of their eyes.
No, it's in front of our eyes all the time, you know, and we have staff that we've taken off their regular jobs and they are working on this, you know, issue and trying to find spaces and trying to find places. And they are, you know, they can only do so much. And they're working hand in hand with Ben and Andrea and Sean. And so it's not like we're not working together either. We're all working on it and it's not working fast enough. But I wish we had started in July. You know, that was my biggest frustration, is that we didn't actually give this direction to city and county staff until September. And we expect something to be done by November. It's not realistic.
But so, people would say, Zan, that whether Hope gave direction, we've known since last March that the shelter was, that November was going to come around. And I appreciate both you and Alita. I think that the council and sometimes the county commissioners and Mark Shepard, they need to show that passion. It's there. I know everybody's working, like you. I know you're working really hard, but the passion doesn't come through. And so people who show up at city council go, wow, city didn't care about this, you know, and somehow just, you know, having your heart on your sleeve a couple of times and just, you know, whether it's Nan or, I mean, you or anybody, but the frustration that I hear is we knew that it was going to be cold. It's cold every winter. We knew we needed a shelter. Why are we starting in September? Why didn't this start earlier? And I find myself when I say, well, you know, I really think the city and the county are working hard. What I hear is, yeah, we don't really understand because you just support the city and the county. So it's a real tricky situation. But I do think part of it is somehow people not understanding really the passion that you all are putting into this. And you know, it doesn't help when Paul says, well, we're doing 10 jobs. Everybody's like, so what? But something else that, I mean, what you just said was moving. And whether it helps the leader or not, it does convey your own frustration.
Carol, I'm gonna go ahead and jump in here. Just to answer Alita's specific question, CSD still funds motel sheltering, and there's a program for that. But all of our providers are struggling with the supportive services staff to help folks stay in motels. And a lot of folks keep not being able to stay in motels because of behavior issues and not wanting to have to, you know, abide by certain rules of conduct that are needed to be next door to somebody in a motel. But that program's still happening. So for folks who can be in a motel, and there's the staffing support from entities like Chance to help them, that is still happening.
I'm not sure we're being told that it's still happening.
Peggy, you know that motel sheltering is still happening.
Oh, I just want to say motel sheltering is definitely still happening. Chance is kind of the key to get in the door. They're the ones that we contract with in all 3 counties to do that work. And what Julie is talking about is absolutely 100% true, that we try to get people in there. We try to keep them in there with supports, all kinds of supports. But a lot of people, because of all the discussions that we've had recently, mental health, substance use disorders, whatever, they blow out of the unit, and the motel folks will not allow them to stay in the motels. And then we have no place to put them.
The other thing I want to make sure, Andrea, you put something in the chat in response to this conversation a while back. Do you want to share it with folks as far as what role the Hope Board could play going forward?
So well, first of all, I love all of you, so I hope you know that. But I have a real issue with using county commissioner and city council meetings to make policy decisions. I think it's a bad idea. I think that, you know, a lot of the proposals and the ideas that for solutions should come way before any of those meetings, and those meetings should be used as places to advocate for those solutions that we've already discussed with the decision makers. So I feel like that's a constant theme in our community, that, you know, so often people get riled up, they go to a city council meeting, they testify, poor decisions, I think, are made as a result of that kind of interaction. And so I feel like the role that H.O.P.E can play is, we have these priorities. We can ask city and county and service providers to report back on the progress of those recommendations. So, you know, even though, and the interesting thing is that, you know, we as service providers have to own some of this too. So the H.O.P.E recommendations are recommendations to the city and the county as to what actions they have to take. However, service providers as nonprofits, we don't have to follow those guidelines. So we have the choice of being able to kind of follow the priorities that we think are important. So I think that having regular check-ins with city, the other side issue is Julie is the staff. There's not like a team of staff. I mean, there kind of is now because people are doing different jobs, but having an opportunity to report back on these things from service providers, city and county, I think is really important, because that way, you know, this group can ask the questions like, what are the barriers to finding shelter? What is the issue? Why are people still being posted when there's supposedly a moratorium on posting again because of COVID rates in the homeless community? Like, why are those things happening? You're not going to be able to have those kind of back and forth conversations at a city council meeting or a county commissioner meeting. And really, it's our job to be tracking these recommendations that we've made. So I feel like that's a really important role for us. We should do that. And that's what I think.
Thank you, Andrea. Charles, I see your hand, and then I also saw Barbara and George's.
Yeah, mine's real quick. I just want to chime in about you know, the public testimony thing. I actually encourage people to come testify at city council all the time, but I also try to educate people, because I think, you know, the whole process, a lot of people in the community have gotten away from engaging with local elected officials. So I'm always encouraging to do so. But the problem is most people wait until they're fired up about an issue and really angry. And that's when it, I think, becomes really unhelpful, is when people come to a city council meeting and are yelling at even me that we're not doing enough, when, you know, without doing the research on what is being done. And usually, you know, sending your testimony beforehand and approaching the council, I hate to use the word, but basically with a little bit of respect and understanding that we all are volunteers at the council level, at least. And that we're doing the best we can for our community. But, you know, I would never discourage people from testifying, just trying to think of the approach and what you're trying to accomplish, and maybe getting more involved long-term than just a single, you know, yelling at a city councilor. So, and I also encourage people to testify at county commissioner meetings with the same kind of approach, just understand that people are working hard, there's big issues, and you know, if you have ideas, fine, share them, but yeah, not to try to expect something to happen at that meeting, but work with your elected officials. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles. Barbara, and then George, and then Reese.
Actually, George was ahead of me.
Oh, thank you. I didn't catch that.
Thanks. I'm going to go back a little bit with Carol, because Carol's comments about the feedback that she's getting from people in the community, I think, to me, speaks to what we talked about a little earlier. It just says that we're not doing a good job about getting the message out about what has actually happened. Because if you go back to the beginning of the pandemic 18, 19, 20 months ago, and think about where we were in relation to a lot of these issues to where we are today, and the work that we've already accomplished and the things that have happened in the community, there's actually quite a lot that's occurred in that period of time that's really beginning to have some positive, hopefully we'll have some positive effects going into the future. But there's also some really serious things that we haven't addressed. You know, the issue of camping is just an issue that hasn't been resolved. And it doesn't look like it's going to be resolved, but hopefully we're going to continue to work on it. In terms of communication, there's two levels of it. I think the communication that I'm hearing from agency directors and agency people here is that the communication between the agencies and local government is at an all-time high. and relations are good. What's lacking is what I started this conversation is the communication between the elected officials, the provider community, the HOPE board, and the rest of the community about the good things that are happening. And so part of what HOPE does is HOPE is a place where we can vet the ideas that are going to come forward that will ultimately come into policy. What's the best practice in this area? If we have a metric, and I'll pick my favorite one, everybody has a place to put their head every night. If that's the goal, then we could develop metrics that everybody here could work with that could identify how are we making progress towards that goal. So we haven't said as a group, overall for Benton County, in relation to issues around poverty, what's the goal? What does a healthy, resilient, inclusive community look like? That's an equitable and inclusive community look like? What are the characteristics of those communities? And those kind of ideas and those kind of metrics become the basis that we begin to say to service providers, to local government, and the community. If we see these things, then people's lives are getting better. We can have a fairly good idea that what we're doing is moving forward in a positive way. And so beginning to develop those metrics and then providing a place where, like Andrea said, we don't want elected officials making policy decisions at the council table or at the county commissioner table. Those decisions should have been made long before at committee levels, at boards and commissions, at different places, so that when it gets to the elected officials, they have some options available to them about what they're going to do, and those options have been vetted. Well, this is the place where options for what happens in the community in relation to issues of poverty get vetted and move forward, and that's what we do.
That was very eloquently stated, George. Thank you. I appreciated that. I think others did too. Barbara, I believe you are next, and then Reese, and then I know that Christina wants to chime in from the phone.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, George. That was eloquent, and I'm so glad that I let you go first. To George's point, as far as the communication with the community, I think one of the things I would like to see the HOPE board be able to do in terms of transitional housing recommendation is find out, well, first of all, this is the idea that I had, is it even possible, is a mechanism available for a private residence to accept an ADU, such as a micro shelter within the city of Corvallis? Do we have a way that our community that wants to be more involved to maybe accept a micro shelter on their property? Is that an option? And if it's not, then why not? Because
Barbara, I'm going to jump in here based on what our amazing service providers like Unity Shelter have shared with me and what I know from fair housing laws. Once you have someone on your property, it could go real sour if they don't have supports and mental health screening beforehand. And there have been a couple really difficult interactions where people got placed in a location and then set the place on fire or locked the door and wouldn't leave. And so while your sentiment of individual residents chipping in is so fantastic, until a lot of planning and screening and help and therapy and regular support happens, that could be just a recipe for a really difficult situation for you and for the person. And that's where the concept of churches that have quite a bit of people, and it is in that same residential location. And also having an entity like Unity Shelter with their Safe Place program be able to go on site on a routine basis and help that person and check in with them and develop a relationship has been successful. So I hate to like burst your bubbles here because they're so bubbly, but just a reality check.
I do appreciate that, and I understand there are obstacles, but my point is, I think that that's something that HOPE board can help work on, is addressing those obstacles, like providing training for the private residents of what to expect, like the screening of the person who's in a housing instability. And then also, I think, Peggy, to your comment related to Alita's comment about people that are that she cannot find shelter for. Peggy mentioned that sometimes it's a behavioral health or a mental health issue where they cannot find placement for that person. That is another communication opportunity for the whole board to the community to say, yes, we know people are still sleeping in doorways, and we're working toward that crisis center to address that. And I think that that's kind of a gap right now that we have in our communication with the community. So
thank you, Barbara. I think Reese was next, and then Christina on the phone.
Yeah, my suggestion goes right along with what Barbara and George was saying. And kind of taking the high level view of what we can help have an influence on as a board. And I would like more discussion on existing infrastructure that can be utilized. And of course, that's what everyone's searching for. But I think there could be a discussion on managed hostel housing or managed fraternity housing to house people. Of course, if a purchase of an apartment complex or a hotel could be purchased and managed. The other one would be landlord programs and incentives for landlords to house people. Maybe an organization where a landlord, where a nonprofit or an organization would insure the landlord that if there's damage to the property, that it could be repaired through the organization. And these things, I just see that the micro shelters are great. They're just one piece of the pie. And looking at the other potential and existing infrastructure, I think is important. For example, expanding or having a nonprofit expand on what Harriet Hughes does, where she manages hostel housing, shared housing. She takes a house, rents out 5 bedrooms to 5 separate individuals, and does kind of permanent supportive housing to a minor extent. And a program like that could be put anywhere and have huge success. She has 70 people in Philomath, or 70 units. Imagine how many could be in Corvallis. And I just think a discussion on that would go a long way in our community.
Thank you, Reese. I think Andrea Myrie has tried to buy every fraternity in Corvallis. Am I right about that, Andrea?
Yeah, I keep typing in the comments because I don't want to wait my turn, but I just want to say one quick thing that, again, using this group to answer questions and to present on progress, I think is a great idea, because then that way people don't go to city council meetings or county commissioner meetings for updates on the issue and to ask questions, because the commissioners and the city council members aren't necessarily the ones at the front lines of these issues. I do think it's good that people go and testify and all of those things, but we should work our purpose. The second thing is finding locations for these services is really hard. And I think having well-connected people who can help make connections with landowners and neighborhoods, I think they should be assisting the city and the county staff as they go about trying to find locations. We certainly wouldn't have any of the locations that we currently have without volunteers helping us make those community connections. So that's another thing that we can do a good job of, I think.
Oh yeah, if you all know anyone who wants to sell a big building, can you please put them in touch with me and Brigida and Paul at the city, because they keep looking at all the stuff on the market and it's gone in a heartbeat. It needs to be people who are willing to sell and not put it on the market and just hold on to it and wait until processes can go in place to purchase things. I want to make sure that Christina can chime in here. So Christina, I'm going to try to unmute you. I've just clicked on ask to unmute. How did that work?
Okay. Can you
there
hear
you
me?
go. Yes, I can hear you. Go for it.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say a few things on the recommendations that we put forward to the county and the city. And I will take Carol's example. Recommendation number 9 says, provide communication, notice, and opportunities for community involvement on the topic. There's other item number 12, increase supportive services and funding to provide services to residents, more affordable housing locations. I could go on in the 12 things that everybody is talking about. And what I suggested was a feedback loop from all these service providers. And I believe, Julie, you had sent something in the email saying this one's doing this and this one's doing that. I believe that's what I saw. But I didn't see anything such as Corvallis Housing First. They're scouting out for new locations. They're having difficulty. That's what I meant by the feedback loop on all of these 12 recommendations. Who's doing what? Who has difficulty? Who's not meeting goals or requirements or whatever it is? And everything that we're saying right now goes back to the recommendations that we propose. And this feedback loop is important. Who
So
needs
Christina,
to do
I don't think you could see the screen, but I shared a couple slides that gave an update about progress and what's happening and where there is activity or no activity, or what Corvallis Housing First is doing for that feedback loop. So I don't know if you just couldn't see the
number
screen.
9 says provide communication and notice, and which Carol was talking about, everybody was talking about. So, you know, those are the things that all of those recommendations have to be, we have to have a feedback loop on. And if they're deficient, like as Carol suggested, everybody suggested, well, we're really not getting a right communication back. Who resolves that? Who does that? So, like I said, I want to revert back to all the recommendations that we propose and what's not being done and what is being done. I mean, I've seen something like there's a jobs training program or somebody's doing this, that, but it really doesn't fulfill the feedback loop on our recommendations.
Okay, thank you for your input, Christina. Andrea, your hand is still raised, but I think it might be by accident, and I'm going to go to Dharma Krishna because you haven't had a chance yet.
Yeah, I really appreciate this conversation. I think too that there should be I guess in thinking about metrics of success for these programs and thinking about them sustainably. I have a few like concerns or thoughts, I guess. One is that like I'm wondering like if we continue to develop services that assume a homogeneity among the population, I worry that they'll continue to fail marginalized health populations. So if we keep on creating services that aren't designed with specific communities like cultural needs in mind, are we going to continue to like have those folks fall through the cracks? So like BIPOC houseless folks or LGBTQ plus houseless folks here in the area, are they going to continue to fall through the cracks unless we're evaluating the efficacy for these specific populations? Like, are we building culturally specific and responsive services? Or are we trying to eke out the bare minimum with our programs? And then two, I'm wondering like what kinds of, I guess I'm wondering about what our role could be to continue to destigmatize homelessness in the area, to better because we can have more expansive services, we can have more expansive location opportunities if we work to like destigmatize homelessness in more widely. I worry that there's this constant back and forth, right, between like what I'm seeing in the community against homeless folks or against my peers who are my neighbors who are homeless, and then in service providers. And I don't think the service providers are perpetuating the stigma, but there's still a high level of stigma in our community. And it's like, how are we, how can we have sustainable programs that are supported by the wider community if we're not engaging in some measure of stigma reduction?
Thank you, Dharma Krishna. I am taking notes on this because I know that one of the roles that the Hope Advisory Board had wanted to play when you all got together almost 2 years ago, one idea was education for the public about what is the face of homelessness and some level of advocacy, and right in line with destigmatization of homelessness and what that means. And Also with the person who came tonight to talk about ACEs and what the face of someone who's experienced homelessness is like, to try to address that destigmatization. Okay, I am doing my best to capture all of your sentiments and put them together and group them into ideas of next steps for the Hope Board. This has been an incredible discussion. I really appreciate all the different feedback, and it'll be the topic of conversation for the executive committee when they meet next month about how to provide some structure going forward for this group so that you all are serving your role in the community to provide that policy direction as an advisory board. I'm going to go ahead and screen share because we only have a few more minutes left here, and I want to make sure that you all are aware of what's happening the next couple of months. The November meeting for you all is going to be 1 week earlier. I will provide a small recap of the feedback that you all gave about what worked really well for you over the past 2 years, the areas of improvement, who's going to be staying on the board for another 2-year term, and how many vacancies the board will have for recruiting in November and December. And then also probably a continuation of this discussion of where the board goes next and some firming up of that discussion about your role going forward. And your December meeting is going to be canceled due to holidays and school being out and taking a pause while we recruit for some more board members. And you'll reconvene in January with possibly some new members. I'm going to continue to do the one-on-one feedback sessions with each of you. I think I'm through with more than half. And then once I'm done, I'll send out an anonymous survey where you don't put in your name or number or anything to give some anonymous feedback in case you didn't feel comfortable giving it to me directly. And then the executive committee will be able to review that in November and December. I think that's it for today. Are there any other thoughts from folks about how this discussion went or how you're feeling at this juncture in your work?
I have a criticism.
Hold on just a second. Hold on just a second, Carol. Someone raised their hand. Jan, go ahead.
Can we get Paula to capture the chat stream and use it and put it as an addendum to the meeting, to the minutes?
Yes, I can download the chat stream and Paula can include it with the minutes. Yeah, thank you. Okay, Carol, go for it.
So it says in our things of behavior that there will be food at each meeting. There has been none. You're talking about holidays. There's no thing that you're providing for us. And I didn't want to share that on my one-on-one with you, but I think the group needs to be aware that there's some, some things we're not meeting some standards, and just kind of file it away. And when we do meet, I would expect, some coffee and cookies and maybe a little brandy.
Perhaps this is the role that the League of Women Voters Housing Committee can play, bringing some great potluck food when we can
I
finally
love
all
you,
meet in
Carol
person.
Butcher.
Okay.
No, we do fall short. In fact, I learned something every time the NAACP has a meeting in community, and the amount of fantastic food and all the photos that get shared. And I need to connect with Jason about how they are doing that COVID safely and sharing food, because it just is such a wonderful feeling. So yeah. Any other thoughts or feelings? I feel like you've done an incredible job the past 2 years, and I'm getting some really great feedback in your one-on-ones. And I think this discussion tonight has been really fruitful about where you go from here. Flip. Go ahead and unmute. There you go.
I'm glad Jan suggested we put the chats because I've been copying them and pasting them. What I see in these things, especially Andrea, was how important these meetings are going to be for us to represent what we're doing to the community. So I just really want to me, that seems really, really important to let the people that go to the city council and be able to come to us and hear what we're talking and give them live feedback. Because like people like Andrea who are right there, they know all the issues going on in front of them. And so to me, we really need to have the things that Andrea suggested in place. To me, to really make it a priority to have like a quarterly meeting or whatever. So that's my words.
Thank you for that, Flip. Yes, Brandy from Peggy. This is a governmentally sponsored forum, Peggy. I cannot condone the alcohol consumption.
Wait, but Carol said Brandy.
Oh, that's why the League of Women Voters will need to host that one, not the county or the city.
I'll take care of the brandy.
Thanks, girl. All right. Any other closing thoughts from folks who have not gotten a chance to contribute today? I'm thinking of Brian or Anita or Joel, our other board member, Janie, anybody else who has any thoughts about how this went tonight or where we go from here?
Can I jump in?
Yes, Dharma Krishna, go ahead.
I know that we're going to have this conversation about these vacancies next month, and I think I would like folks to really think critically about how not diverse this group is right now. Like coming in, like, you know, it's very isolating being maybe one of the only people of color, one of the only trans people, one of the only out queer people. And I think in order to like really achieve some of these goals that we have, like the hefty goals of like ethnic and racial justice, that I'd really like other council members to really think about how we can engage those populations and really consider why those people aren't already at the table here now. In our representation, because I think there's a lot of really great folks here, but I'm really concerned about the lack of equity and diversity that's gone into the makeup of this group before now, and then moving into the future. I want folks to really think about that over the next month in ways that we can really substantially partner with communities of color and marginalized groups here to really increase their representation and voices here.
I appreciate that feedback, and I have done so much to try to improve that. And if you are interested and have the time, Dharma Krishna and Johan, I see you just popped on the screen. I'd love to meet offline with you and hear your feedback, because I've met with Johan and also Rocio, our health equity director, and reached out directly to the NAACP leaders and Casa Latinos leaders and Native American leaders with Siletz and Grand Ronde and here locally. Talked with Peggy about providing a stipend to anyone who needs it, and really have trying to do as much targeted recruitment and outreach, but there's always room for improvement. So maybe Johan and Dharma Krishna and I can huddle up privately and see what more we can do. Oh, and Peggy, thank you for sharing your heritage. I appreciate that.
Peggy, I appreciate that message, but I think when that's said, that can really be kind of defensive, and it could really feel really hard when someone gives that feedback that something's needing more feedback, more diversity, and then to say, well, we're diverse in naming something. I think I want you to like acknowledge that, yeah, you're Lebanese, you have these other identities, that's really important, but I also don't want that to be done just as a defense to the feedback that Dharma was just sharing. So I want to make sure that we are continuing our work.
Yeah, Johan, I totally agree. And I appreciate everything that you and Dharma Krishna said. I just feel like sometimes we leap to some assumptions when somebody's new to a group. And I just want to be honest about that. You know, there are, you know, these are things that we are considering and that we are thinking about, and not that we can't do better, but let's just don't, you know, throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Well, I will continue to work on this as we do recruitment, and I'll circle back with Johan again and include Dharma Krishna this time, because I am always down to learn something new from a different perspective, and the perspectives that Dharma Krishna brings and your experience at OSU, I think will help inform all these recruitment efforts. So thank you so much. I see one more thing in the chat before we end. We need to meet in person at some point to get to know each other on a deeper level. I can't wait. I would love to even meet with my kids' teachers in person. It is killing all of our souls to continue to work like this through COVID in all so many different ways. So I echo that sentiment. But it is still great to see you all here tonight. Thank you everyone for being here, and all the folks from our community who chimed in and listened in and gave great feedback tonight. Thank you to all your board members. And we will see you next month, but 1 week early. I've changed the calendar invite on your calendars, but Alita, I know that doesn't mean anything for you. So I'm going to email you the day before and remind you that it's a week early. It's not the week of Thanksgiving. Thank you all. And I'll see you in about 3 weeks. Everyone have a good night.